Okay, good morning. We're having a conversation with Rick Zalesky, and our topic is basically faith journey and a lot of aspects of that. Rick, the first question we usually ask each other is your memory of your first experience with Christian faith, where it came from, how it started.
Well, I grew up in what I would call a typical divided family. My mother was a devout Roman Catholic. My father was an Episcopal, and their solution for the children was never go to church, because my side is right. And so we were what I would refer to as the Christmas and Easter appearing children. That wasn't really a very deep faith, but I was at least exposed to that. And so I didn't really become a believer until much later in life. And that happened right here. So when I was in college, I met my wife, and Charlene, and she said, I don't marry anybody who's not a believer. So it's your call, but it's got to be sincere, but we could shortcut this relationship if you don't come on board. And so she took me to Pastor Charles Stanley's church, which is right next to where the Fox used to be. And we're on TV and all that, and I said, this isn't doing it. And a friend at Georgia Tech said, well, you ought to go down to Peachtree Christian. I think you'll like Tom Money, and he's got a nice way about him, and I think you'll find it for an unchurched person, it's a welcoming environment. And we got married here, and that's how it all happened. That's what I would call the beginning of being a true believer for me.
You're not the only person I've heard a story like that come from. Well, somebody in this room may recall being told, well, if we're going to be dating, you need to come to church with me. That person is here.
Yeah.
Tell me about how things grew in your faith, because you were an adult, well into adulthood, when this happened. What happened and what influences came along that changed how you saw the Christian faith and how it affects your life?
Well, I would say the thing that, so we get married, not too long after that, we both graduate from Georgia Tech, and it's off to the working world, and we both take positions in California. And we think we'll just find a Disciples of Christ church there. It'll be just like Atlanta. Oh, contraire. That was not the case. And so we didn't really go to church. We would occasionally watch something on TV, but we really let it all slide for the better part of 12 years. And then our son was born, and we got moved to Port Arthur, Texas. And at that time, in the early 90s, you would get weekend calls. Someone would come up to your door, knock, knock, knock. Hi, I'm from, in this case, it was First Baptist in Port Neches. We'd love for you to come join us at church if you don't have a church family yet. So we said, yeah, let's do that. And that was the place that true adult Bible fellowship entered my life. Now, my wife grew up with all of this here in Atlanta, but I didn't. And so we went to a young adults class, and there was a guy named Eddie Green, and he was an accountant. But what I later learned was he was actually a pastor who decided that really wasn't his calling, and so he was an accountant, but what he did with all of those gifts, those spiritual gifts, he was a fabulous Bible teacher. And that changed our trajectory. So then it became, wherever we're going to live, we are going to find a church that we can worship at with fellow believers. No more excuses. There's no reason. It's out there somewhere. And if it's not a Disciples of Christ, or if it's not a Baptist church, there'll be something. So lo and behold, we get moved to California again. And I thought, oh my gosh. So we tried one more time, this time in the Bay Area, to find a Disciples of Christ. Impossible. And we went to the church that was the closest. Anybody heard of that dilemma before? And it turned out it was a growing church, and they had everything you could ever want for a young family. All kinds of kids programs, everything for the adults. And it was a Presbyterian church, and we were there for 9 years. And if you ask our children, they would say that was the best time of their lives, being part of a church like that. And that really is what changed things. The other thing I wanted to mention was during that time period, I was introduced to miracles. And so Charlene had developed a heart arrhythmia, probably from a tick bite, long ago. And she got atrial fib, and they do the shut you off, restart you thing, really wasn't working. And her cardiologist said, "I've got a new procedure. You'd be one of the first in America. Are you willing?" It's now pretty standard, but at that time, it was not. It's called cardiac ablation. And so that group of women at the Presbyterian church, they meet every Tuesday. Tuesday happens to be the day of the procedure. And the doctor said, the reason this is risky is that your arrhythmia is variable. And for this to work, I have to see the exact spot on your heart that's acting up. And if it doesn't present, I can't do anything. So 125 women were fervently praying, and I looked at my watch, and it was 10:05. It happened. And the doctor said, "How did that occur?" And my wife said, "It was a miracle from God. That's how it occurred." I had no doubt. So that, to me, was the first time I had ever experienced something that profound. And after that, then I started looking around for little simple things, because God's in all the simple things, not just the big things. But that was a big deal that I'd always wrestled with. What is the power of God, really? And I saw it revealed. So that's a little bit of both. How's it evolved? Maybe in the interest of time, should I go to the resolution? I'd like to leave what you guys think about.
Sure.
Again, we had a great adult Bible fellowship in Houston, Texas. We lived there, and one of the guys who later became our financial planner, just so happens, we were studying a passage, and and I don't remember which book of the Bible it is, but it's where, you have been blessed to be a blessing. That was the theme. And that clicked for me, and I stopped thinking about me and started thinking about what I could do. And at that same Bible study, he said, and you realize all of your worldly possessions were created and given to you by God. So don't be stingy. That was the theme of that particular class. And I've tried to act upon that ever since. And actually, it relieved a lot of stress. Once I realized I'm going to get what I need, and if I get more than I need, I got it to share, not to hoard, life became a lot more joyous. It was that simple. Now, not to say we're perfect in any way and that those things don't sort of fall off the table from time to time, but my life journey has always evolved, and it's been about, in the later part of my life, I'll call it the more mature part, just being open to the message and listening for that small voice from time to time, because it's not necessarily constant, but when you need to hear something, it's going to be there, and then act upon it. That's kind of my story in a nutshell.
Thank you.
You bet.
Usually we ask people, what do you recommend that other people do? I think you've already told us, Rick.
It's an option for you to consider. So.
Yeah, consider giving.
Amen.
Thank you, Rick.
You bet.
And we look forward to many more opportunities to share.
Yeah, absolutely.
And thank you.